Good morning, everyone. Hey, I thought we had like great breakfast. Good morning, everyone. All right, awesome. Welcome, everyone, to HackerRank Main. I'm Vivek. I'm one of the founders and CEO of HackerRank. This is our 10th edition of Main and the second in London. We did the first one last year, and I couldn't come because they didn't give me a visa. But now I'm here. Super excited to be here. I'm also excited about the Cricket World Cup. Any cricket fans here? Oh, all right, good, okay. I get no response when I ask this in San Francisco or New York, just so you know. So I'm watching a couple of games. I've always wanted to watch a cricket game in London. Love the beautiful Lords and the ground, so super excited to be here. So welcome, everyone. One of the things that we do a lot in Maine is we try to balance the agenda between the future of where the technical recruiting industry is headed to what needs to happen right now. As practitioners, what can we do right now? So that's going to be the agenda even for today's Main. So I'm going to walk through what we're going to discuss in the next couple of hours. We're going to start off with my keynote, match every developer to the right job. I know you're all looking forward to my keynote. Yes, no? Good, awesome. I can't change the agenda now, just to be clear. So you have to look forward to it. And it's going to be followed up by a demo of our product by Oded, who's our SVP of product at HackerRank. So you can think of it as I'm going to share the vision and where the industry is headed, and Oded is going to talk about how do you actually implement this on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to start off with that. That's going to be followed by Gaurav, who's our SVP of customer success at HackerRank. He's going to walk through a research that we did where we sent out a survey. We had over 70,000 developers respond to the survey. We actually do this on a yearly basis, so this year was our second consecutive year, and it's one of the largest developer surveys. And we ask a wide range of questions from when did you start to code, what do you look for in a new job, what turns you off when you apply for a job. There's some really interesting insights. So we have packed a few really interesting insights that you can go ahead and use it in your recruiting process as to what developers think about the recruiting process right now. So we're going to talk about that. That's going to be followed up by two really interesting panels. The first one led by Hung Lee, who's the co-founder and CEO of Recruiting Brain Foods. Hung is somewhere here. Welcome. Highly recommend you to subscribe to his newsletter. He also says nice things about HackerRank in the newsletter, so that's also one of the reasons. Yes, no? All right, good, good. So he's going to lead the first panel. That's going to be, we're going to have Lindsay from Optiver and Brad from Expedia. So we're going to talk about a diverse set of topics from recruiting, diversity, university recruiting, how do you standardize the recruiting process, a lot of interesting topics we're going to cover. And the second panel is going to be led by Gaurav. We have Sarah from Lloyd's and Paul from Bazaar Voice. I believe Paul flew in from Belfast. I've never been to Belfast, but wanted. So thank you for flying in. And so it's really important, as you all know, when you're going to implement an assessment process, that you need to get the buy-in from both the recruiting as well as the hiring manager. So we're also so that's how the panel is structured. If you look at the first one, it's more on recruiting, and the second one is on hiring manager. How do you actually get both of them to align when you're going to implement the process? So that's what we're going to go through over the next 2 hours. It's a packed agenda. And success for this event would be if each of you can take like 1 to maybe 3 takeaways that you can go ahead and implement in your recruiting process that has a positive business outcome, that would be success. All right? Let's get started. We also have lunch. Is the lunch good? Good? All right, so lunch is good. So success would be 1 to 3 takeaways and like good networking and good lunch. All right? We can get started. So we're going to start off with the mission of our company. The mission of our company is to match every developer to the right job, the underlying driver being skill over pedigree. So it shouldn't matter which school you went to, which company you worked at before. What matters is do you have the skills to do the job or not. That's the underlying principle with which we build products, with which we hire people, and that's the principle with which we build a company. So why is this important? Why is this mission or why is this principle important? Now I'm going to talk about like a trend that's happening in the market. and I'm going to give you in the lens of demand and supply. Demand being the companies who are looking to hire developers, and supply being the developers themselves. So I'm going to give you a lens of that. So let's start with the demand. One of the big transformations that we're seeing, and you're probably familiar with this, is every company is becoming a software company. It's not financial services. What is it called? It's fintech. Like I had our CMO, Nicola, actually switched his bank, not because they had poor customer service or not because it was far from his home, but because the app was not intuitive. I'm not making this up, and I'm not going to tell the bank from which he switched. But it's amazing to see how people are making decisions. It's not financial services, it's fintech. And if you look at retail, every retail store is now re-architecting the platform to make sure their website is good, they offer same-day delivery, their app is good. It's no longer retail, it's all tech. And then when you think about the automobile industry, maybe just think about 10 years back when you used to buy a car. The questions that you used to ask, what's the horsepower, what's the engine, what's the color, make, and all of those things. You still ask those questions, but what else do you ask? You also ask, does it have Apple CarPlay support? Or does it have Android Auto? Or is autonomous driving in your roadmap? This is my first time in London, and London traffic reminds me a lot of back home in India. And if they can figure out autonomous driving to work in London and India, I think AI will definitely supersede humanity. Right? It's amazing to see how people drive, and it just reminds a lot for me in India. So those are all the questions that you ask. It's no longer just about the car engine and make, but what is the software that's powering? And if you look at the trends again, this was an article in Computer Weekly. Now, the good news is London is starting to become a very, very strong tech hub, which is a lot of people are coming. It's actually the most preferred destination for developers who are going to move here. Now, the bad news, or however you want to say, is the transformation is happening at a rapid pace that everybody needs to adapt to this quickly. And this was a recent article on the right end, TechCrunch. On an average, a new car right now has 100 million lines of code. To put that in perspective, that's the number of lines of code the entire operating system of Microsoft has. So it's completely changing. The demand side of the equation is completely changing. The market is changing at a very rapid pace. So that's what is happening on the demand side. Now I'm going to talk about the supply side, which is the developers themselves, and what are the changes that are happening in the industry. Now, before I give some stats, I want to share a story about Adriana Rivera. Adriana was a C++ developer back in the 80s, and she actually built one of the first real-time financial trading apps. She now works as a data scientist at Randstad. No big surprise. You start as a developer, you're really good, you continue to move up in your career, and you're now a data science. Except she took a break for 14 years. What started off as a 3 to 6 month maternity leave ended up becoming a year, then ended up becoming 2. She had another kid, so it ended up becoming 3, 4, and time flew, and now it's 14 years. And she wanted to get back into the workforce and started applying to a bunch of companies. Now, the first step of the recruiting process, we all know, is we look at the resume. And then everybody saw, oh, wow, it's a 14-year gap. I'm not sure if you'll be able to adapt to our new ways of working. And she got turned down across the board without even getting an interview. It's crazy. The amount of systemic bias that we have in our recruiting process is crazy when you have resume as a first step. And then she decided to only apply to companies that put skill as the first method of evaluation before even you do resumes. A lot of companies actually use HackerRank in that way. She aced every one of the interviews, got multiple job offers, and is now pursuing a career as a data scientist. Now, this gives me goosebumps every time I share this story. One is, of course, the fact of kudos to the persistence of this woman, to actually work through and get back into the workforce. But second, it's stunning to see the kind of biases that we have in the recruiting process. Now, I would call Adriana's resume as a non-traditional developer resume. Now, here's the good news or the bad news, depending on which side of the coin you are in. There are going to be more or a majority of the developers who are going to come in the future, the next 10 years, are going to have a non-traditional developer resume. And non-traditional does not mean that everybody has like a 14-year gap. No, that's not what I mean. Non-traditional are so many different ways. People are going to not go to school to learn how to code. They're just going to learn on their own. Or people might just prefer to go and learn in a boot camp. People might just like do hobby projects on their side. So the core atomic unit by which we are all doing recruiting right now, which is based on resumes and GPA and like which school you went to and all of those things, is going to completely vanish because like over 50% of the developers will not have a great resume. So those are the big two changes that are happening on the demand and the supply equation. So on the demand side, you have every company becoming a software company, so pretty much you're competing with everyone. And on the supply side, resumes are going to be pretty much rendered useless in the future. And so that's why when we started the company, our mission and the principle is super important because we're building the underlying building blocks of matching a developer to a job based on the skill. We launched 6 years back, and so far we've transformed the recruiting process for over 1,500 customers across the globe. We've assessed over 5 million developers. That's about 20% of the world's developer population, who have cumulatively attempted over 21 million challenges on our platform. The scale at which we operate, so there's a developer who attempts an assessment or an interview every 8 seconds. So somewhere in the world, some developer is attempting a company's assessment every 8 seconds. So that's the scale at which we operate. And I'm super proud and happy to see a lot of these great companies. I view customers as like our partners, where we work with them to transform the recruiting process, and they're a part of the mission, when I think about it, to transform the industry to move into a skill-based, unbiased way of recruiting. So I'm going to give you a couple of sort of case studies or stories of how companies have transformed their recruiting process and what impact it has had across the board. I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with Booking.com, yeah? They're also a partner to the World Cup, so which makes it sweeter. We started working with Booking.com about like 4.5 years back. They were just starting to grow. And one of the most impressive things that Booking.com has done in using HackerRank is they have evened the playing field across the globe. When I walk into Booking.com's office in Amsterdam, it's almost like an ad for Olympics. It's such diverse population, the type of people and everything that they've actually been able to hire. And what they've done is they have a standardized challenge for every role. You're applying for a front end or a DevOps or a site reliability engineer, back end, whatever it is. And no matter wherever you are in the world, we have a well-calibrated challenge for each of these roles that you're going to attempt. And once you clear the bar, we're just going to bring you on site, fast-track the process, and get you hired. Last year, they were hiring about 70 to 100 developers a month. That's the scale at which they were operating, and it's amazing to see how they've been able to attract talent across the globe. Huge transformation that Booking.com has gone through. The second example I want to share is Goldman Sachs. We're all familiar with Goldman Sachs. If Goldman Sachs had a resume, it would say 100 years of work experience, right? Goldman Sachs has been there. It's amazing to see. And now they are in the process of transforming themselves into a real strong tech company. And one of the ways that they use HackerRank, or the whole idea of assessments, is to brand themselves. The challenges are real world. So the assessment challenges that they actually give to candidates mimic what you'd actually be working when you join the company. So everybody knows about Goldman Sachs, but do you actually know the technical challenges? So it is not only a way for them to qualify talent, it is a way for them to share, hey, these are the kind of problems that you'd be working on. Would you want to just change the color of a button in a large tech company or whatever? Or do you actually want to work on preventing fraud? Which one of them is more technically challenging? So these are couple of companies where we have fundamentally re-architected their fabric of becoming a tech company at scale using HackerRank. And there are a lot of interesting stories that I'm happy to share. So from a platform perspective, which Oded is going to walk through, we have like 3 different components. The first one being the code screen, which is the take-home challenge assessment that you can create your own custom challenge, brand the challenge into a similar real-world problem that you're actually going to work on. We have Code Pair, which is a pair programming solution. I'm guessing a few of you use whiteboards. Here's newsflash, which you might probably know. Developers hate whiteboards, just so you know. It's super hard to write. You don't actually write on whiteboards or code on whiteboards on a day-to-day basis. So Code Pair allows you to have like a real-world pair programming session where you can watch the other person code, whether it's a remote or on-site. And then you combine this and get tremendous amount of insights into, and some of the example insights is, what are the kind of sources that are working well for you? Where do you need to double down to hire developers? What are the kind of skills that you've been hiring over the last 12 months? Where do you need to augment? What are the skills that you actually have, and where do you need to augment? Lot of insights. This is the first time you are going to have like a very data-driven recruiting process that is going to inform you what you need to do over the next 12 months. So that's the platform in a whole, which we're going to walk through from a demo perspective. So just summarizing, the way your recruiting process is going to get transformed is we're going to base your recruiting process on skills over resume. We're going to dramatically reduce the time to hire. Like people have actually been skipping interviews. People have reduced the interview stage, and as you calibrate more. And we want to have a consistent hiring bar. How do you make sure that the 100th engineer that you're hiring is as good or better than the first 99 engineers that you've hired? How do you measure that? So those are the ways that we can actually impact your recruiting process, the way you build teams, the way you hire great developers. And finally, I want to end with a note. We're a very developer-centric company. As a lot of people have asked, hey, are you going to branch out into doing assessment for different roles and others? I think for the near future, probably the long-term future, we're going to stick to developers because there's so many different types of developers. You have like back-end, full-stack, data science, security. And one of the internal metrics that we track is what we call as developer love. It's very, very important. And every time a developer attempts an assessment, at the end of the assessment, they rate the quality of the assessment. Is it good? What was the experience like? And we try to hold ourselves accountable to having a 4.3 on 5 rating across all developers who have attempted all assessments. This is the 90th percentile benchmark that we hold ourselves accountable. And we also let you as customers see what developers are actually telling you about your interview experience. It's the first time where we are quantifying the candidate satisfaction rating to tell you what developers think, what kind of brand you have in front of developers. So that's a lot that in terms of the market trends, in terms of like how we actually help you transform your recruiting process aligning with the market trends. Now to actually see it in working, I'd like to invite Oded, our SVP of Product, on stage. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Vivek, for a great overview. And what I'm going to do next, I'm actually going to demo the product and going to focus on those 3 dimensions. How does the product help you assess skills? How do we help you reduce your time to hire? And how do we help you make sure you have a consistent bar throughout your interview process? So let me start by looking at this page. This is a page for a company, obviously a fictitious company. I defined for this event. It's called HackerBurger. The mission of this company is to match every hungry developer to the right burger. I hope it sounds a bit familiar with some other company's mission. And the company is about selling food. But like many other companies, as Vivek just mentioned, they depend on development. They depend on technology. And they need to hire developers to enable their core business. So what you see here, this is a page from their career website. And it has a specific job post for a full-stack developer. Now, what exists today, and many of our customers are starting with that, is that if you click Apply Now, you go into a very long form that asks the candidates to fill out the information about themselves, upload a resume, maybe a LinkedIn profile, and submit that so it adds up in your ATS. And as recruiters, when you go through that list, it's very hard just to scan through all those resumes and really to decide which one of those should move to the next step. So what I've done in this demo, I actually integrated CodeScreen. CodeScreen is a take-home assessment. It's a tool that allows you, as the recruitment team, to assess the skills of developers based on their actual skills, based on their programming abilities. So let's start. As soon as the developer click Applies Now, it's actually going to jump into a HackerRank page dedicated for that specific company, dedicated for HackerBurger. You can see here on the top that this is a test with one question that's going to take an hour or up to an hour to complete. There is description on the process itself. This is custom created for that company, like what should you expect, what do you need to do, and what will be the next steps. And then you can even brand it with your specific company. You can add a photo of your very happy developers from HackerBurger. You can add your logo and so forth. So a dedicated experience for that specific company. As developers move to the next step, in this specific case, we're asking them to upload the resume and then start the application process. And remind you, the application process is going to start with a challenge, with a coding challenge. So I'm not a developer by heart. I'm actually going to ask one of my colleagues, Adam, to join me on stage and apply for a great position in HackerBurger. Adam?
I heard that.
So let's go ahead. Please apply for that position. Please start solving that specific coding challenge.
Okay.
So what's going to happen next? Behind the scene, we've integrated HackerRank into the process. Adam is writing code now. He's seeing the challenge, and he's developing a solution for this challenge. And as soon as he submits a solution for this challenge, we've integrated with the company's ATS. In this case, I'm using Greenhouse as the ATS for the integration, but we have a dozen other ATSs that we can integrate with. We're okay? We're done?
Yeah, I just hit submit.
Great. So let's go into my ATS. Great. I can see in my ATS that's the set of candidate list. There are 5. Adam is the last one applied, and there is a new entry just showed up there for Adam. So let's dive into the application itself. Most of the data here is straightforward. You see the name, you see the email, you see a resume. You can go and review the resume. But what's unique, what the integration provides on top of it, is what you see here on the right. There's a summary of the test that Adam just completed. He received 100 on this specific challenge. Good job, Adam.
Thank you.
Now, if I want to dive deeper into the specific code, I can go into, in this case, this activity feed and open, download the PDF. The PDF is going to show me all the information about the submission. You can see here, it's the information about the insights from the solution, the coding challenge itself, the code that was written, even the test cases that we ran to get to eventually a perfect score for that submission. So as a recruiter, I can look at the resume, I can look at the code, I can assess, and I decide to move forward. This is a perfect score. There is no reason not to move forward. So what will be the next step? Let's go back to the different stages. So I click Move Stage. So the first step, as you can see, was a CodeScreen score review. 100 is as good as it gets. I'm going to move him to the next step. Next step is going to be to invite Adam to a remote code per session. What is a remote code per session? Again, moving from whiteboards or other practices that are not as efficient, CodePer allows you to have an interaction between the developer and seeing the developer as they write code. That can be done remotely, or in this case, locally. It can be, Adam can be in a different city, in a different state, a different country, and we are going to share a screen where I can actually assess the skills of Adam as he implements a solution. So let's move to that specific stage, remote code per session, and let's schedule an interview. Again, integrating into this ATS now, let's schedule it for now. Date, time, and I'm going to click the code per link. As soon as I click the code per link, Greenhouse as the ATS makes a call now to HackerRank. We generate a dedicated session that Adam and myself are going to use, and we're going to send it to both Adam and the interviewer. The interviewer is going to be Oded Shekel and sending the invite. Done. So everything is set now. Like as soon as the time comes, both Adam and myself are going to jump on the interview. Adam, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's go into the code per session. So this is the code per session. What you see here is a shared programming environment that allows me as the technical hiring manager to assess the skills of Adam or the candidate. Usually as a technical hiring manager, I do three things when I assess developers. I ask them to explain the specific assessment that they've already done, like why did you implement it in such a way, making sure that I understand his thought process and we can move to the next step. Then I check for correctness of the code. And last, I add complexity. Actually, I'm trying to make it as hard as possible to understand like the limits and how far can we go. So let's start. I'm going to start by loading the solution that Adam already implemented for the question that I given to him. The question was to compute a hacker burger bill. As Vivek said, many companies who are using us are actually creating challenges that mimic what developers are actually going to do in their job environment. So in this case, it's pretty straightforward to calculate the bill. So let's use this question. So as soon as I click it, you see the question is on the left here. And you can see the code that Adam actually implemented. I can also open up a video session with Adam. Adam, see me?
Hey.
Great. Okay. Adam. So what I'm going to ask next, Adam, is can you please explain to me how did you implement the solution for that challenge?
Yeah, so we got the bill total function here. It has the number of burgers and the number of fries the customer ordered. And we know it's $5 for the burgers, which we multiply, and $3 for the fries, which we also multiply, and then add together here.
Great, great solution. By the way, challenges are usually going to be a bit more complex than a single line of code, just a bit. But for sake of complexity, we decided to stay here. So, okay, so that interaction is important. It allows the hiring manager to understand how does the candidate think and why did he implement it in such a way. Next step usually is going to be to go and assess the correctness of that solution. So let's put some, let's say, random numbers. Let's say how much will be a bill for 4 burgers and 3 fries. For those of you who are quick at math, it should end up being
29.
29. Good job, Adam. Okay? So that's actually an output from the code itself. So the code works as expected. I can throw numbers at it and make sure like it actually can solve the problem. Okay, so far so good. We did 2 things. We asked Adam to explain the solution, and then we checked the correctness of the solution. So now we're moving to the more complex problem, which is let's add complexity and add more requirements on it. Adam, I would like to add a discount on our bill calculation.
How much discount would you like?
Let's do 15%.
Okay.
50% on burgers, please.
So I will multiply the burgers by 1 minus 15%.
Great. So let's run it. Let's see if it works. Okay, compilation error. Thank you, Adam. What happened next? And then just again to highlight the difference between just a whiteboard or any type of exercise with a programming environment. In this case, there is a simple syntax correction that needs to be made, and the tool detects that immediately. Can we fix it?
Yeah, so it even tells me I'm missing a bracket, which I'm inserting here, and run again.
Do it again. Okay, and the number is 26. Great, 15% discount on burgers went down from 29 to 26. So again, if you just like summarize me as a hiring manager, and one of the things we're enabling is to allow me being efficient. I was able to load the code that was implemented at home as a take-home assignment. I was able to ask Adam to explain his logic, check for correctness, and then add complexity. In this case, in a few minutes, it's a simple challenge, but we're seeing customers and technical hiring managers that are doing it like in less than 30 minutes. So it allows me to be very efficient and focus the effort on deep skills that the programmer has. Thank you, Adam. You passed this stage as well.
Thank you for the interview, and I'm looking forward to join HackerBurger.
Yes, let's do it. So let me just summarize what I've done here. I've taken 2 capabilities from our product. Code Screen, which is a take-home assessment, and Code Pair, which is an interactive session between a programmer and an interviewer. And I integrated those into the flow. So sourcing in this case was straightforward. It was inbound. Adam just went in and applied for my career site. Then screening was done on an assessment. So I was able to look at the programming skills, the specific skills I'm trying to hire for, and assess those in that specific candidate. I was also able to make sure that my tech brand comes across in the process itself. The challenge to calculate the burgers, in this case, was specific for my company. So screening was based on skills. Then as we moved to phone interview, the interview itself was overall efficient and allowed the interviewer to, again, focus on skills and focus on skills in a consistent way throughout the process. So I can jump into the code and I can assess Adam's ability to move into the next stage. So that's obviously like a glimpse of the product, and I showed just part of it. I'm here for the rest of the day. For those of you who want to ask more questions on how to adjust your processes to those specific needs and what can be done to make sure you achieve skill assessment, reduce time to hire, and consistency. And without any further ado, I do want to welcome Gaurav here to stage to share a bit more about the inside the minds of 71,000 developers.
Great. Thanks, Oded.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to HackerRank.main London again. It's exciting to be here. I was here last time when we did this. I see at least we're twice more larger in terms of folks that are here. We're also live streaming it, so it's great to see now the 10th HackerRank.main and how we have grown. Very similarly how HackerRank.main started off last year as a meetup in our office in Palo Alto and has now grown into this global tour that we do. We've done this in Sydney, twice in San Francisco, twice in New York, twice in London now, in Bangalore as well. One of the other things that we started last year was research. And we decided to reach out to the developer community that's part of HackerRank and said, let's survey them and let's get into the mind of the developer. And let's bring that data forward to you, which will help you drive your strategy. So apart from just using HackerRank as part of your hiring workflow, as an assessment tool to assess skills, there is a lot that we can offer for you from this data on how should you develop your sourcing and your targeting strategies. So when we did this last year, we had 40,000 developers that participated in this survey. And when we ran it again this year, and there was a ton of feedback that we got from all of you who had access to this research data and said, we want to know more and go dig deeper. This year, we had 71,000 developers participate in it. And there's amazing set of learnings from this. Now, this data is all available to you. All you have to remember is research.hackerrank.com, or you go to our blog and you can search for it. And all of this data is available to you. And you can slice it and dice it and look at it different ways. There's developer research. We've got women in tech, student report, one from where we reached out to all of you in the recruiting space and took your perspective, so you can see the difference between what engineers and developers are thinking and how they approach their job search versus how you're approaching it. So please feel free to use it. There is no form. It's not gated. We're not going to have someone call you the minute you download the report and try to sell you anything. This is purely for you to use as part of your strategy. So for the next 30-odd minutes, we're going to dig deeper. We took some of the key learnings, and hopefully that's something that you can use as soon as you get back and you're working on your strategies around hiring developers. So it's, the first question we asked them was, what was your first coding project? What was your first coding project? Let's start with all of you in the room. What did you code first? Takers? Paul? Wow, that's pretty intense. That was the first coding project. Cool. High school, sorry? You were 15. That's great. High school test, right? Capturing the scores. The developer community is now telling us that calculators is what they're building as their first coding project. It's very different. I belong to the light green, not the dark green, although I may look like it. It used to be games. When I started coding, and I play more engineer on TV, unlike Vivek and Adam and Oded, first time I did a coding project was build a game. It was a Commodore 64, just after Atari. Definitely age me now, but that's where we typically started. But it's fascinating to see how that's rapidly changed now. And building a calculator is what they first do. Like a lot more complex things than let me just go build a game, right? What are the top languages that they know between 2017 and 2018? This is important to all of you. What do you think it is? What are the top languages that they know, that developers know this year versus last year? What are you all hiring for? What skills? What language skills? Erlang? Golang. What else? C, Java? Go ahead, sir. Java versus Python. Very good. Okay. Let's see what their top languages are. The top language for 2018, the most popular is JavaScript. We were drilling down a little bit more on why JavaScript, right, compared to some of the other languages. One, it's self-taught. You don't have to go to school to learn it. You learn it on your own, right? And more importantly, more and more developers are doing, I want to be able to build an app. They're becoming more full-stack developers. And the way, in using any of the frameworks out there, Node, React, Angular, learning how to do JavaScript now allows you to build a full application. So we were like, okay, there is definitely a trend where that's becoming the most popular language from last year to this year. And we'll continue asking this question and see what the trends are in the market. Okay. What do developers look for in a job in EMEA? So this is a very specific question, and we were able to dissect the US versus EMEA versus APAC. Any guesses or questions? What do you see as you're talking to developers, as you're trying to recruit them and hire them in your team? What did they tell you is the most important? What are they looking for in the job? My answer would be comp, but that's me. First thing I look for. What are you hearing? Flexible hours? Great. Anyone else? Culture? Awesome. All right. Challenge of the job. Very good. Yes. Purpose. Excellent. Great. What they're looking for, the single biggest, what matters to them is professional growth and work-life balance, just like you mentioned, right? So professional growth and learning, number one, work-life balance, my comparative compensation is 4, but interesting problems to solve. And a little later, we'll dig into more, how does this cut across generations? And you'll see it's different. But it's really interesting to see how growth and learning and work-life balance is super important to them. That's what they're looking for in their job. So as you're messaging to them, make sure that you're using this data and where their head is, and making sure that that's something that you're bringing forward to them, because that is very important to them. What about what's turning them off from employers? What are developers telling you? What don't they like? Why aren't they taking the job that you're offering them? No guesses? All right, let's see. The single biggest one that you're losing developer candidates is because it's unclear on what role they're applying for, right? So in our job descriptions, when you're talking to developers and you're talking to them as prospective employees, it's really important that we're giving them clarity on what's your role going to be? What team are you going to be on? And we've seen this with some of our customers, where even in the job description, they'll have links or they'll have a lot of detail on, this is the team you're going to be joining. This is the role you're going to be playing on the team. This is the kind of work you're going to be doing when you join the team. It's really important that they get that clarity. Versus, I need 50 Java developers. Great, you're going to be one of 50. What am I going to be doing? Don't know. Right? They're looking for that clarity on what is the role that I'm going to be what is my role on the team, which team am I working for, and what's the impact going to be. That's super important to developers. So it's important that it becomes part of your message. One of the things, Nicole, our CMO, it's something that he mentioned to us in a conversation, and we've taken it to a couple of our customers, and they're trying this, and don't be afraid to try this with the developers. Do like a win-loss. We do a win-loss. When you select us, we want to know why you selected us versus a different solution or just staying with your current process. And when you don't, we also ask you that question, hey, why didn't you choose us, right? What could we have done different? Do a similar analysis with a cohort of your candidates that have rejected you. And let's learn from them, and don't be afraid to experiment with them. They're super vocal, and they will tell you why they did not. And this is a clear indicator of what are the kind of things that are a deterrent for someone to come join your company. So take this to heart. Don't feel afraid to experiment. Ask them these questions for when they're not joining your team. Okay. See the next one. So Gen Z. So of the 70,000 developers, 10 that were part of the survey, 10,000 were part of Gen Z. And this is a fascinating sort of cohort of individuals that this is the first year they're coming into the workforce. 32% of the world's population is Gen Z. 2019 is the first year that they're coming into the workforce en masse. You're going to have Gen Z till 2034 as part of your early talent pool, right? So we're stuck with them for a while, for a fair amount of while. So just to get, what is Gen Z? You're born 1997 or later. Any Gen Zers here? No? I'm guessing not, since you're just entering the workforce. So this is all new to you. How about millenniums? All right, most of you are millenniums. I'm a Gen Xer. I know I look like a baby boomer, and then the whole long hair stuff is not working to try and make me a millennium. Any Gen Xers? A few of us. All right, this is going to be great. So most of you are millenniums, which is awesome. I know we as Gen Xers have been indexing more on how do you hire millenniums. We have our like, hey, you're different, we're different, we think differently. But it's interesting to now see Gen Z as a cohort now entering the workforce. Think about it. They're all digital natives. 25% of the Gen Z population had a smartphone before they were 10. Before they were 10, 25%, and they make up 32% of the world's population. I have a Gen Zer at home. This long hair is actually foolishly trying to compete with the Gen Zer as to who gets to man bun first. I am losing terribly. I don't know why I came up with this idea, but we did, right? For him, he had a smartphone before he was 10. He doesn't understand the concept of laptop, mouse, any of that stuff. He just operates out of his phone. That's just the way he is, right? So it's a very, very different mindset. And we'll spend some time on really understanding what are they saying about being part of the workforce and what's driving them, right? So again, as you start building your strategies around early talent hiring this year, this is what's going to help with those strategies. So the first question was, how does this generation of developers learn to code? How do you think they learn to code? Where are they learning to code, or what channels are they using? YouTube. What else? Actually, YouTube is right. It's amazing, one, that majority are self-taught. And they're learning how to code before they were 16. So it's not college. They're learning way before college. Paul, you mentioned you started at 15, right? And so they're learning how to code way before they got into college. And so this is meaningful because their degrees are not going to be a predictor of their skills. Even more important that the resume and what school you went to and what degree you studied doesn't matter anymore. Right? So it's really important that you look at this and say, and then YouTube, you're absolutely right. Video is one of the most used mediums for learning right now. Think about it. I'm learning how to code before I get into college, and I'm using YouTube to learn how to code. I never thought that would be the day. Right? It was always go to school, get a degree. That's how you learn how to code. Right? So it's an interesting mix. And because YouTube and video is so popular, it's really important that it becomes part of your messaging and your strategy around it. Oded shared before the landing page where when you click on a test and you saw a picture of the Hacker Burger team, more and more introduce video. Have someone from within your team or your engineering team do a short video, really quick, put it up on YouTube, embed it on that page, and you'll see a lot more affinity to click and watch a short video versus go read a lot of text with this generation, right? I think it's attention span, but that's not what they're telling us. Excellent. Okay, what programming languages do they know? This one shocked me. I was expecting a very, very different outcome from when we did this research. What programming languages do you think this Gen Z, this population knows? What are they learning? Sorry. JavaScript, okay. What else? Python, great. Any of the modern languages? Go, really popular, Swift. All right, let's see. So the good news is they know 9 and 10 languages that you all need, that your teams are building on. I was expecting Go, Swift, all of these, the more self-taught, more modern languages is what they're learning. They are still very much learning, and they know JavaScript, Python, C, right? And these are fundamentals. They're fundamental languages, so they are studying those fundamental languages and then building from there. So that's the good news, right? That it's not like they're off on a tangent, and while we may not have evolved our stacks to harness the newer languages, yes, they're learning them, but they very much are learning the core languages that we've built our stacks on. So that's good news. Not what I was expecting, but it was good and heartening to see that they are aligned with what we're doing as well. Okay. So how much does Gen Z value diversity compared to millenniums? Now, most of you raised your hand that you're millenniums, so I expect a lot of you to have an opinion on this one. How important is diversity to Gen Z compared to all of you? Very? Okay, great. Paul, did you look at the research already? No? Great. You know your team. Perfect. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So interestingly enough, we looked at this and said they value diversity twice more than all the other previous generations. So millenniums, most of you, me as a Gen Xer, and even baby boomers, pretty much had the same level of how we assign value to diversity. But for Gen Z, this is twice more important. And so they're much more aware and value this more. So this is, again, a key learning that this needs to be part of your messaging to them, in your outreach to them. How important diversity is to them, make that part of your brand. It's important that it's part of your brand as you develop your tech brand. Job priorities, how do they differ from you? We talked about job priorities overall for the developer community. It was growth, learning, etc. For Gen Z, it's growth and flexibility, which we saw before as well, and challenging work. It's not work-life balance, and it wasn't comp either. The biggest were growth and learning, which you saw from the overall report, and it was challenging work. I really want to know, am I going to be doing something interesting? Am I going to have an impact? Definitely drives them. I have a theory why the other two, work-life balance and competitive compensation, is not high on their agenda. I just don't think they've reached those milestones that all of us have. Wait till they get a mortgage and a loan, and then we'll see where that goes. But definitely this is important that in our messaging and our outreach to them, that this is what they're focusing on. So give them the clarity on what problems are they going to be solving when they come on the team. They want to know that, right? You're all solving very, very tough problems. Vivek shared the example with Goldman Sachs. And it's not always am I going to be changing the color of the button, and am I going to go from a square button to a rounded edges? What problem are you solving? At what scale are you solving it? Those are really interesting challenges that they want to know. Am I going to make an impact, and is it going to be something? They're not afraid of hard problems. Is it really going to be challenging? Am I going to learn something from it? That's really important. So we've got to highlight that. And then, some key takeaways from all of this. And again, as I mentioned, if you want, there's a lot more research, there's a lot more data that's available on sort of what's the mind of the developer, 71,000 of them, and then the Gen Z. So as you plan your strategies around Gen Z, specifically, 5 key takeaways for you. 1, recognize that they're digital natives. That's super important, right? And so you have to go across multiple channels to reach them, not just email, but video is something that's really important. So as many channels as you can reach out to, you should, given that they're digital natives. Focus on your tech brand. A lot of this is around how your tech brand, or how are you being perceived by this growing group of developers that you're going to be targeting. And all of the things that are priority for them and the way they think needs to be represented as part of your brand, right? Third, let them know what to expect during the interview process. This is a really important one. There's a lot of ambiguity in terms of what happens next. How do I prep for my interview? It's really important that they know how they should prep for it, not just come and take the assessment, but actually give them a chance to go prep for it. And we see this really working out really well, where some of our customers actually have gone and built an assessment, which is similar to the one. It's not the same one, but as Oded was showing you, a similar question, and saying, go practice this first. Go get comfortable with HackerRank, the environment, if you've not used it before, which is a small cohort that have never done it before. But more importantly, get prepared. This is not something that we're going to score you on. We don't care how you do there. We're not even going to look at the results. It's just for you to practice so that you're better prepared when you actually come into the interview. And that continues beyond just the assessment. How do I prepare? What can I expect during the interview process? And it's more than just how many days is it going to take for you to respond to me, right? They want that clarity, but what can I expect when I come on site and I'm going to do 5 interviews? Okay, you told me 5, but what is each one going to be? And so it's really important that you give them that exposure and help them understand. And there's lots of examples of where this has been done really well, where there's a lot of information provided and clarity is provided right on the careers page as to what is your interview process, what is your philosophy around interviewing within your company. 4th key takeaway, I talked about this. What problems are you going to be solving? Super important to them. Make sure that's very, very clear to them. And it starts just with even on your careers page, even in the job description. We tend to spend a lot of real estate in our job descriptions on the company, what skills you're looking for, and that tends to be languages, frameworks, and tools, and then that's it. But it's really important that even as part of that, it's important to just let them know what problems are you actually going to be solving when you come join the company. So every chance that you get to give them that exposure, do it. And then the last one is broaden your reach. The traditional ways and traditional sourcing, sort of where we've gone to, especially for early talent, going to the schools to hire is no longer going to be enough, right? It is boot camps was sort of the next phase. Last year when we did this, there was a big discussion on boot camps and going beyond just the traditional schools. Now even that's not enough because they're learning on their own. So there isn't no boot camp to go hire them from, right? So you have to broaden your reach. And remember, the university they went to, the degree that they've gotten really isn't that important anymore, right? It comes down to if you have the skills for what I'm looking for, you're it. So those are the 5 key takeaways. That we've sort of taken and bubbled up from the research. There's a lot more that's available to you. We're, of course, here after the event as well if you want to dig into any of these. I'm happy to take any questions on any of the data that you have, or we'll bring up the panel, which is what is going to be the most exciting part of this morning. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any, or we can take it after we finish the panels and we go into networking. Okay, well, let's get on to the panel. I'd love to invite Hung Lee, Lindsay, and Brad on for the first panel, and then I'll come back with Sarah and Paul on the second panel from an engineering perspective. Please.
Thank you, Gaurav. Very interesting data that was. Before we kick off the panel, I just want to get a feel for who's in the room. Who is actually actively hiring for software engineers right now? Raise your hands. Keep your hands up if you're having a good time doing it. No one, right? It's a hard job. And before I kind of get into the panel discussion, I just want to emphasize that this is one of the hardest things you can do in recruiting, is to hire this technical talent. I don't think anybody really has a guidebook as to how to do it perfectly. So as we're listening to these 2 wonderful experts talking about how they've done it, I also want you to think about how you've done it and what lessons you've learned and can potentially contribute when we're in lunch later on and networking. Let's use this as an opportunity to do knowledge share. And at the end of it, if we can all pick up 1 or 2 things that we didn't know before we walked into this event and that we can implement the next day, then we're all going to be better at doing this very difficult job. Anyway, I just wanted to introduce these wonderful guests here. In fact, maybe you 2 can introduce yourselves. So, Lindsay, I wonder whether you can go first and just say who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay. I've been with Optiva for almost 6 years. Began my career as an agency recruiter prior to that. Joined Optiva to assist with technical recruitment in their Chicago office. Was leading the recruiting efforts there for the technical group and have actually just recently moved to London. We have a small project that we're running out of here. where I'll be assisting with some of the recruitment, not only here in London, but also for our team in Amsterdam as well. So I guess in a nutshell, that's me.
Great. Bradley?
Hi there, everyone. So I've been with Expedia for about 3 years now. Originally, I was a sourcing consultant. I've been a recruiter in the agency side as well. Last year, I was able to move into programs. So my current remit, I am sort of like the global lead for all pre-hire assessments, whether it's tech or non-tech. And then I have other projects as well around emerging technologies, really, but all recruitment related.
Great. Fantastic. So let's just dive straight into it. Recruiting tech people, what do you think is unique about recruiting for this type of person compared to salespeople, marketing people, and that kind of thing? Lindsay, go to you.
I mean, it's just, they're so highly sought after, right? And basically the world is their oyster. You know, they can work in fintech, they can work in, you know, kind of emerging web technologies, gaming. You know, it's such a broad arena, and often it comes down to kind of what they're interested in, and really kind of what's the value proposition that you and your company are going to provide that, you know, make you stand out, and why they would want to come and work for you. So yeah, you've just got to hope you do something interesting, I think. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the toughest things that we've seen, is just, especially for really kind of high caliber talent that has that skill set, you're probably not the only person that, you know, wants to hire them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, basically market awareness, right? The developers have got a very highly sensitized now as to how valuable they are on the market. And that's a totally different proposition to someone who, you know, is highly motivated to work for you. So you've kind of introduced the concept I was going to dive into, but let's go straight into it. Talent brand. Like, how do we explain ourselves to that market as to why we're an interesting business when, you know, actually on the surface of it, maybe we're not? Bradley, any ideas on that?
Yeah, so what we did, we have a central sourcing function, and that's our first step, is understanding our market. What are the developers interested in? Finding ones that are travel orientated, because that's what Expedia do. That tends to be a good place to start. So we're trying to really match our products and what our environment is to what the developer would want to go for. We tend to do that through hiring events. I actually set up a pizza and beer event where we didn't actually talk about any jobs whatsoever. We were just teaching about the culture of Expedia, the type of projects that we work on, really trying to push our brand out there, not as just a travel company, but a technology travel space.
Yeah. How about you, Lindsay? Because Optiva is quite an opaque financial type of business, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those arenas, proprietary trading, that is a little bit unfamiliar to people. When I joined, I hadn't really heard of Optiva. I knew what we did. So I think really what is interesting about it is that everything's built in-house, right? You've got developers that can come in. They are building the software that's used by our traders. So it's not necessarily a product that they're building, but the thing is that they've got an active feedback loop that's pretty instantaneous from traders, from a live market environment, in terms of what they're building. Is it working? They can see the impact every single day. And I think that's one of the things that we've really had to ensure that people are aware of when, you know, we're talking about Optiva, the work that they're going to be doing, and that typically the people that they're going to be interacting with, you know, that they can have really kind of interesting technical discussions. They've got a trader that's trying to explain, this is something that I'm trying to do, this is a strategy, and then really kind of collaborating and working together to actually build something out. And so how do you get that message across? It's every single thing that you can think of, you know, in terms of websites, social media, actually getting out there and telling people. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that we have to continually think about, especially in a company and kind of, I guess, industry that's, you know, sometimes the connotations around it aren't always necessarily positive as well. So I think really just being forthcoming and trying to make it as transparent as possible for people that might want to come and work for our company.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing I'm getting from both of you two there is that, and it's actually linking to Gaurav's, some of the research that you did, is it's about the challenge of the work. So don't worry too much if you've got a brand that isn't a sexy B2C brand or what have you. Yes, that may help. But in fact, if you've got really interesting technical problems to work with, which presumably you do have, find a way to expose that. And build your talent brand based on that working challenge. That seems to be what the engineers are more interested in, rather than, you know, oh, here's a glitzy consumer brand that, you know, I'm interested in. Very interesting. Okay, moving on to kind of a second issue, which I think is an underrated problem in tech recruiting. I think that we're not great necessarily at having the right kind of relationship with the hiring managers. And sometimes if we don't get that right, we end up absorbing a huge amount of pressure. Where are the candidates? How can I find these people? What's the matter with you? How do we get that part right, the internal conversation with the hiring manager? Brad, go to you.
Yeah, I think to start with, you need to have a conception meeting between the hiring team and the recruiters. You need to establish the core criterias for your technical skills and for your perceived soft skills as well, like the cultural fit. Working in partnership together to be aligned, I think it saves time down the line and removes that adversity that can be there. Realistically, what we've done inside Expedia, we've worked with the developers to come up with a test with those core criteria in mind. Therefore, when we're going to add to those question banks, we know what they're looking for now. We've assigned automated scoring on the assessments to take away the manual workload from the hiring team, because we have to remember that the hiring team aren't recruitment-centric. It's only when they have the need, when they turn to us. So we're trying to really remove all of the constraints from them and really just improve that consultative approach.
Can I just say, before I go to you, Lindsay, did you encounter that situation, Bradley, or has that evolved since you've been there?
Well, essentially, when I took this post up now, we had HackerRank in place, but it was a bit of a mess. So my mindset was, okay, we need to have all stakeholders in the same place to start this off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Lindsay?
I think I walked into a situation where I was quite lucky, to be frank. Our CTO and kind of our leadership group had basically said, people are our most important thing. Guys, this is your problem. You've got a recruitment team to work with to figure that out. And so it kind of made it, just kind of, you really needed to foster that type of collaboration for them to be successful. They need people for their team. You're the people to try and help them get those people. So with that said, we did have a couple of kind of key people that really put some effort and focus into, okay, how do we find these people? What's going to be interesting? Since this is one of our biggest issues that we need to focus on, let's take some time to create something that we think is going to be really engaging, that we think people are going to respond well to from a candidate experience perspective, but then more so, how do we, ensure that we're getting kind of the evaluation that we need? So I think, don't get me wrong, there's some healthy debate that happens between, kind of each side, but I think that's a good thing. I think that's helped us continue to tailor the process that we have, thinking about it not only purely from, yes, we need these assessments, we need to make sure that we're evaluating people, but, interviewing, recruiting, kind of going through that process it's not an easy task. So how do you make sure people feel comfortable along the way? And I think we've worked together quite well, I think, to find a good balance there. But very lucky that it really came from leadership down.
Yeah, I think without the kind of endorsement C-level, suddenly the problems become sort of maximized, don't they? Let's drop this down to a tactical level. There's probably people in the room right now are thinking, you know what, I don't have that C-level guy who's supporting me. I'm getting a lot of pressure coming at me. Developers are not giving me the time to tell me what I need to do the recruiting job. How would you kind of recommend that person tackles that scenario?
I think recruiters, you should have hired a developer in your company, or one of your colleagues will have. it's really reaching out to those people. It's the same thing we've always done in recruitment, it's networking. So we could go to a past hire. Hey, we're working on this solution to make your team better. We are trying to improve your processes. Same with the hiring managers. I always think whoever's got the largest number of complaints, that should be the stakeholder you partner with, because they have already got they've got all of the adverse comments. You know what you've got to fix. So there's problems now. Let's build the solutions to it. And those people, they are always keen to chip in. Let them do that and work with them and give them onus and make sure that they become accountable.
Yeah, sometimes we underestimate how interested non-recruiters might be in recruiting, actually. And if we were able to open it out a little bit and tell them our story and what the recruitment function is actually doing, it might be certain people will emerge that will become powerful allies to the function that we might have kind of not initially thought about.
I think you have to sort of manage expectations. So when I'm doing anything, I say it's probably going to take 2 hours a week out of your working week. Just managing their expectations, so they know how much they have to commit. That sort of allows you to have a successful working relationship with them. Because sometimes you can get buy-in, you don't manage your expectations, and then they don't work with you because they're too busy. So it's just getting a balance of that.
Yeah. How about you, Lindsay? Any tactical tips?
I'm in for complete heated agreement here. So it's, I think it's really kind of leaning on those people that you can learn from, right? I think spending time with developers, getting an understanding of kind of the work that they're doing, and then often kind of their interest and involvement. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. The people that have typically the most complaints about, like, we need these people in. Yeah, I think it's a good entry point to kind of work with them, partner with them, and yeah, kind of share that problem.
You can also challenge those people as well. I think it's quite important to challenge people that are vocally putting the pressure on. Because they need to understand that the recruiting team is there to help them solve the problem, but they're intimately involved in making that solution happen. They're the interviewers, they're the ones saying yes, no, they're the people that ultimately need to sell the talent brand, right? So I think some people are super vocal, you're right, let's isolate those folks, let's understand that they're motivated, at least they care, but we need to channel that energy in the right place and be strong enough to do that. Okay, great. Moving on to talk about the measurement of recruitment performance, because I think that's related to how we can present the TA function to the rest of the business. So senior people in particular are going to want to see some numbers. What do you think are the most important metrics that we can present to the internal stakeholders to get them to understand the nature of the task that we have? Lindsay?
I struggle a little bit with metrics because I think if you're too focused on purely the numbers, that recruiters focus on the wrong thing, right? And I think what's most important is that we find the right people and bring them in, and whether that's 5 people versus 10 or whatever, that if we get the 5 right people, that's most important versus like just, okay, did you hit your numbers for the year? I think numbers that can be telling, though, in terms of ways to kind of keep an eye on your process, make sure it's doing what you want it to, throughput, length of time between kind of each stage of the process as well. I think usually they're kind of the key identifiers if there are bottlenecks, if there are issues, and really kind of have been some of the things that have helped us kind of change some of the stages of our process versus kind of, these are the metrics, this is what we're presenting. At the end of the day, the one number that they want to hear is how many hires do you have, of course, but kind of how you're getting there, I think kind of provides some color along the way as to making sure that you get the right hires.
Yeah, actually, it's a little bit deeper than that than how I initially framed it, because the numbers obviously need to drive action also. So, what are the metrics that's caused you to change course or to amend your process once you've captured that data?
Yeah, I think one that was really kind of a big turning point for us was we previously had technical phone screens, and just the amount of time that we were and the people that we were able to get through the process, it just wasn't. interviewers were getting fatigued. We didn't feel that it was necessarily kind of the right evaluative approach. So for us, we found that it was the point that was really slow. We couldn't get people through quick enough. We needed to identify a different way of being able to put people through the process. And so we actually changed how we were interviewing. So we put the HackerRank test first to kind of eliminate that as a bottleneck. So for us, it was one of those things where it was a key identifier for, we have an issue in our process, let's address it.
Yeah, I think some of those legacy processes that we have, the phone screen, for instance, that, I don't know how long, that's probably been around since the telephone started being the primary way we did the recruitment. But how inappropriate is that when you think about you interacting with software engineers? It's probably the least appropriate thing that we should do. So if anybody's still doing telephone screens, have a think. How about you, Bradley? Metrics, things that have caused you to change course?
I think we look at metrics in a few different ways. We have source candidates and then we have applicants as well.
Yep.
So with your source candidates, what you're really looking at is, let's say on a weekly basis, how many people have I reached out to and spoke with, how many people are now in consideration for the role. Because if those metrics are good, then the sourcing's right. If not, then we need to make adjustments there. Then we have metrics that at the assessment stage with candidate attrition. That's something that we monitor heavily. And then we have metrics with time to interview as well, because as we were saying with the developers, it's a candidate-saturated market. We can't really afford to have a 60-day time to fill with these guys. It needs to be really prompt. So that's like a core thing for our technology candidates. And then candidate experience, so with our NPS, we're monitoring that heavily as well. When we send out these assessments, for example, are we using standardized templates that manage the expectations for the candidate, show them through the process A to Z. So there's some of the metrics that we're looking at.
I'm pleased you mentioned NPS actually, because that's one of the things I really loved about the presentation that we saw earlier was this, the developer love metric, 4.3, amazing. If that's globally across 70,000 developers or however millions you've got, I wonder how important that is for us to try and take care of, even with the ones that fall out of the process, of which we know there's loads. Are we asking them about how they feel about the journey they've had with us?
I think there's a healthy balance when you look at NPS. So obviously, you've got your brand there, and that needs to be strong and positive to attract talent. But you're always going to get negative feedback from candidates that haven't successfully been hired or gone through all of the stages. You really need to have a look at that feedback and pick the bits that seem logical that you can fix. We're looking at NPS now. Part of me, I obviously really agree with it, but another part of me thinks, oh, this is a trending thing. And it seems like a big focus in recruitment across the industry at the moment. So I'm not actually sure where it's going to go ultimately.
Yeah, so a bit of skepticism creeping in for you about the value of it, particularly when you see successful candidates, obviously market high.
Yeah, the questions that that people tend to ask in the NPS survey as well. Sometimes I'm like, it seems to me like you're leading to that objective that you wanted to get to.
Yep.
So I'm a bit skeptical.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, maybe it's about when we deploy it, how many times we deploy a test. It's not really a system, a method of capturing how they feel about that process. So I think, we need to get a little bit more nuanced in how all of that works. Okay, great stuff. I think we're short a little bit on time, so I'm going to keep skipping through. We need to talk about automation and technologies. You can't really go anywhere without looking at some technology that has some sort of AI or automated component. What part would you say we can trust an automated solution to take away from our jobs?
I think it's a little bit tough to pinpoint. I do think there's a value in terms of maintaining some of the human element. Obviously, the business and industry that I'm in is very, very automated, but how Optiver approaches it is still kind of keeping a human element there. I think one area that we feel is increasingly interesting is the evaluations themselves. Is there pinpoints where it could be really telling for us as to how somebody might perform. Are there questions that are strong indicators of that? Are there questions that are totally useless at doing that? And let's get those out and kind of reevaluate it. So I think for us, that's probably one of the areas that would be the most interesting in terms of kind of looking to get some stronger analytics from, getting a better understanding of.
Do you have any questions that, and any data to share with us on that? Like, what are the things that do seem to indicate poor performance or strong performance?
Well, I mean, I think we've done it in a very manual way, kind of
Yeah.
internally, because we continue to look at how we're evaluating people in terms of our interviewing process, and how does that basically reverse engineering it. So if there was a way for us to be taking a more automated approach to that, I think it would be very interesting. But a lot of it's kind of thankfully some of our technical people internally taking the time to really get an understanding of, do we feel like this is achieving what we're kind of targeting it to do.
Yeah, very interesting. How about you, Bradley? Where do you see AI featuring in the recruitment funnel?
Featuring, I think it's here right now. Whether it's ready to be employed is a different story. So we've done some research with AI. We're actually working with a vendor that will pass your CV. Basically, the robot picks up all of the keywords that we built in, and it will say this person is so suitable, like a certain percentage of suitability towards the role. It's good, yeah, the tool works, and the robot is learning to pick up different things from schools to different languages to project lifecycle, as skill data points as well. But in general, I feel like we're shifting away from resumes. So then I'm thinking, well, this seems like it's a really cool technology for now, but I don't know if it has a long life cycle. We've also tried AI for scheduling, interview scheduling, and it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. NLP, it doesn't have the same empathy levels as a human. So if you were to say to a robot, I can't attend this interview because of a personal grievance, it will reply to you in the same way as if you said I was 10 minutes late. So what we've actually opted for is automated systems, which I prefer. They've been within HR and recruitment for a number of years, so they're established. You feed it an instruction and it follows that instruction. It's simple. And it doesn't remove the human element as well. So because you add in all of these AI things, you're going to get your employees scared. Yeah, that's what we've noticed.
Yeah, that's really interesting feedback. I mean, AI is something obviously we need to care about because we can see the efficiency gains that are potentially there for us. But at the same time, it is going to be a big change for a lot of people. Maybe we've got to figure out how quickly we want to do that.
I think it's still a very new concept. If I was to look at AI products outside of recruitment that I use in my house to date right now, there's not many that I can think of. I couldn't think of more than 5. That tells me that potentially it's not ready for recruitment then.
Yeah, that's a great way to judge it. Like, where does it appear in my life? Probably Netflix, right, or something like that. And if you're satisfied with the recommendations you get from Netflix, then maybe it's time to go. But I totally get what you're saying. It's a really good measure. Okay, moving quickly on. How long have we got, Gaurav? Give me time.
We have time.
Oh, we've got time, 4 minutes. Great. So then I want to cover 2 more questions that are sort of kind of related. Firstly, I want to talk about the talent shortage. We all kind of put our hands down when we were saying we're having a good time recruiting tech people. We're not. Very difficult. Everyone's competing for the same talent. Is there really a talent shortage, or is there a reason that's generating the experience that we've got that seems to be a talent shortage? Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in short, I think it depends on what you're looking for as a company. I was looking at all of the coding languages that were up on the screen.
You're C++ in there, aren't you?
Yeah, so Optiva's not web-based at all. So it's one of those things where, students learning C, C++, kind of getting those fundamentals, it's something that's really interesting for us, and especially kind of the way that we're hoping that they approach those problems. It's interesting. So I think it depends a little bit on what you're looking for as a company, but overall, I think, there's a few very talented people that a lot of people are fighting over. And that's not necessarily to say they're the only ones, but I think every company has something different that they're looking for. So, yeah, C++ engineers, and we're pretty agnostic in terms of, if it's C or C# or Java or whatever. But somebody that can come in and actually engineer a solution, that's something that's really challenging for us to find.
Yeah, that's a really legitimate point. Maybe when we're talking about the tech talent shortage, that's too broad a way to describe it. We actually need to look at it from a language and discipline point of view, because it looks like from the data that we've seen at HackerRank, JavaScript will probably get more common and has become more dominant. People want to do it. But more venerable languages that are still powering a lot of financial services like C, C++, maybe that talent shortage is genuine and it's actually going to be exacerbated as more people, gravitate towards web app type production. How about you, Brad? What's your view on the tech talent shortage?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a talent shortage. I think the methods to obtain that talent are probably lacking in some areas. What we do at Expedia now, we really don't care what language you're disciplined in. It's the level that you code in that language, and then it's your aptitude, your hunger for learning that we really prioritize now. And that's allowed us to open the funnel so much wider than just looking for our back-end Java developers. So that's one way. And then so we centralize a sourcing function where all they do is map the markets. And this is something I used to do myself. If we were based here, I want to do a commutable radius search for all of companies that use the same stacks or that are e-commerce, different variables. And then we just find all of the businesses. And then from there, we locate all of the developers. There's definitely not a shortage of talent. It's just getting to them that's hard.
Yeah, engagement problem, pulling them out of jobs, for instance. So the visibility of the talent might be there. But the language agnosticism, I think, is a very powerful way to try and open up the talent pool, isn't it? Because if you can get away from pedigree, and I know it's hard because you want the ready-to-go skills, but if you invest in a little bit of training and you have to get the messaging right, it might be you open up a wider...
I think it depends what level of developer you're looking for. I understand the move away from pedigree for our graduates coming into the business. But when you're looking at people who are very senior, working in a company the size of Expedia, they need to have that experience beforehand because there's so many facets, a number of stakeholders. It's not just the actual coding part of the job as well. So pedigree does play a part into consideration for certain roles.
Yeah, so we need to put a seniority lens on it also. So maybe at the entry level or junior level, or maybe an operational level, we want to try and go agnostic. But
I don't believe the funnel should be the same. I don't think the process should be the same for a graduate developer as for an experienced one with 10 years. I think it should be very
interesting. I don't think we're going to have to time. Time is up. But I want to cover one more thing that is very important we cover. So I'm going to stay on the stage if that's all right. We need to talk about diversity because it is quite well known, I think, that software engineering in particular is not particularly diverse, both in terms of gender and also in ethnicity and even age and stuff like that. So what can we do as recruiters to try and open up talent pools that we're currently not bringing into the pipeline?
I think, again, this is something that's a little bit difficult in terms of, I think the example Vivek gave earlier is really valuable. We are very content focused. Do they have the skill set? And if they do, then we're very, very interested. And so, I think we have a variety of people that come from all different walks of life and not necessarily, are just coming from computer science degrees from, top universities. Some of our engineers, they were school teachers and things like that beforehand. So I think it is just kind of a level of open-mindedness so long as they have the content and the skills, making sure that there's that access point for them.
Yep. Very quickly back.
So you've got vendors such as Textio, which will highlight masculine versus feminine language. That's one way you could target your adverts towards females. I think diversity is very hard because it's easier to set up campaigns for gender as opposed to ethnicity. If you were to ask me how do I find a certain I wouldn't know. But I think, tailoring your adverts so they're not biased, and that's a great thing. Digitalizing the process as well. So actually having actors that mirror the type of people that you want to hire, that's something that we're doing quite largely in the graduate space. Yeah, so there are a couple of ideas there.
Yeah, there's lots of things we can try. I'll leave it with a final thought, because one of the great values, I think, of a product like HackerRank is that it might give you the ability to decouple a little bit from the resume and open up a wider talent pool, because you can put a lot of people through it. And a lot of people that previously you might have rejected on an application or a CV or what have you, you might then think, you know what, let's get this person to do the challenge, and then from there, we'll make that assessment. Okay, I'd love to keep talking with you guys. I'm going to keep doing that when we do the networking downstairs, but please put your hands together for Lindsay and Brad for that brilliant talk.
And get to learn a lot from you. We're going to move on to the next panel, and I think this is the really unique about this event in London. We've typically had, like Lindsay and Bradley, your peers up here on the panel, and it's giving you different perspectives from a recruiting standpoint. But today we have the opportunity to have the other side of the equation, and maybe next time we'll do a bake-off. But it's great to have Sarah and Paul with us to give us the engineering perspective. So I'll have them introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right in. Sarah?
Okay. So I'm Sarah Milne, and I work for Lloyds Banking Group. I'm the engineering lead for capability and culture. So recruitment and attraction is part of my brief, alongside giving engineers the skills they need for the future of a digital bank.
Paul Hill, currently with Bazaar Voice, and site lead in Belfast. My undergrad's computer science. So I've been in computers since actually 14, I think, is when I first got introduced to them. And as site lead, I'm kind of just responsible for all aspects: recruiting, offers, culture. Like, it's extremely diverse responsibilities.
That's awesome. Sarah, we'll start with you.
Okay.
So when we first met last year, you walked me through the sort of the transformation that Lloyds is going through. Lloyds has been around since 1752, if I have the year correct. Very well established. The oldest bank in England is what you shared with me.
Now you've got to check my credentials, how well I know the
And
company.
it's fascinating to see the transition that you're going through. It's a very, very strong established brand within the banking industry, but now you're having this massive transformation that you're going through within the bank, where you're saying, we're not just a bank, but we're a technology company, right? You're a software company now. And you're going through this massive transformation, and it's having an impact on your tech hiring, the way you're building teams, et cetera. Share with us some of your insights on what's been some of the challenges for others that may be going through a similar kind of transformation.
Sure. So yeah, it is a big challenge, right? So firstly, the scale of our transformation. So we're looking for hundreds of software engineers across our major sites. So the scale is scary. Secondly, as you say, we're known as a bank, but the tech brand, still working on that. So trying to get over the ambition we've got and the transformation we're undergoing, is the main part of the challenge. And I suppose how we've addressed that, in a couple of ways is that sort of typical approach of data and creativity. So from a data perspective, we need to know what we're faced with. So I'll give you an example. When we first looked at the number of quality engineers we wanted in Edinburgh, when we looked at the data, that was 50% of the quality engineers in Edinburgh. So that kind of then leads you from, well, the data's telling us we need half the people who actually live here to come and work for us. That's probably not going to happen. So then comes in the creativity. So we have to look at our pipeline then through apprenticeships, graduate schemes, partnering with organizations that help us train and then deploy with us, and then after a certain period of time, we give them, we give the option then to come on as a permanent colleague. So it's that whole sort of creativity piece along, knowing the data and telling us what it can tell us, and then adapting accordingly.
Awesome. The other big part of this transformation that you've shared with us and we're working together on with you is around reskilling, right? Mm-hmm. You've got a really big very talented group of engineers that have been with Lloyd's for a fair bit of amount of time, but you're going through this massive reskilling exercise with them, and this has an impact on your hiring strategies, right? So now there's a whole pool of individuals that, as they get reskilled, are part of the talent pool that's available to you. How is that working? And how is that endeavor that you're going through around reskilling?
Yes, that's a really interesting point, Gaurav, in terms of we've got some loyal colleagues who've been with us a while, and we are reskilling them, but they are key to our hiring strategy because they know other people, they've got friends, they've got family, they've got a network themselves, and if they're feeling invested in themselves, then our colleague referral program is quite buoyant, and you get rewarded for it too. So that's an avenue. You've got to look after the folks you've already got, and then the engineers that we've invested in, they become very much a key part of our hiring strategy. So we pull on engineers in the local area, in the local teams, to be really front and center of our hiring approach. So that can be just from initial contact and coffee chats with potential hires, that it's kind of softly at first. We don't go necessarily heavy on the interview if it's just an initial, maybe Lloyd's is for me, but maybe it's not. But talking with real people who are, day to day handling those challenges on the ground. So it comes back to that, what would I be working on?
Right.
You get that firsthand. Well, you're going to be working in the mortgage value stream. That's going to mean these challenges, that challenges with this technology. So it makes it real. And then we've developed a sort of technical hiring pack that then helps our engineers be, part of that process, but also to keep that dialogue going. So, we're a bank. It does take a while to get through all the checks to be able to become, a developer in the bank. But then to have that continuity of dialogue and contact with the team that you would be joining, just to keep that process ongoing, and they're not feeling, this is taking too long, and they get diverted off somewhere else. So that's it. And then just to put the spotlight on the upskilling that we're doing. So last month, I took 240 of our developers to Google to learn about the Google Cloud Platform. Well, we put a lot of publicity around that sort of thing, so we make it visible what that investment is, and it's a multi-layered approach.
That's awesome. That's great. I think it's amazing to partner with you, and I get to see small parts of the challenge that you're solving. But yeah, it's just the learning from this experience that you're going through is phenomenal. Let's switch gears, Paul. You have a different set of challenges that you're the one who created the first team in Belfast, right? You started building out the team. The first team was built out in Austin, which is headquarters for Bazaar Voice, and then you took on this endeavor of saying, I'm going to build a team from scratch. Probably very different experiences, Austin, Texas versus Belfast. Tell us more about that experience and the differences in building teams in two completely different geos.
Sure. Yeah. So the one thing about Austin when I joined 5.5 years ago is that they already had an established brand. So it's not like we had to really work at building a brand in Austin. So coming to Belfast, there was nothing, right? No brand. And if I don't know how much people know about Belfast, but there's a very clear, close-knit group, and the technical area is even more so. It is not uncommon to, run into 3 or 4 people, just walking down the street that are in the exact same field as you. So it was very important to start off right and avoid going wrong when it came to building the brand. And me personally being involved, having the computer science background, talking about the technology, having been at Bazaar Voice 3 years at that time, had a good experience across the different parts of the organization. So, and I don't think I ever talked about recruiting at any of the meetups. And initially, that was not intentional. It's just I forgot because I get excited about tech, and I start talking about tech, and I forget about oh yeah, by the way, I'm recruiting too. So. The first 7 folks we hired was very, I didn't realize it was going to be a salesperson. So, and that's really what I was doing. I was selling the brand, the culture around technical, all the things that have been said so far. What are the technical challenges? I didn't give a crap about the languages. Yeah. I controlled my language there. I didn't care about the languages that anyone knew. In fact, the first 5 folks, there were 2 that the only Java background they had was maybe a class in university, maybe. So it was ignore that and just figure out, can they solve problems? Are they willing to learn? And that flexibility on my part enabled me to attract people that wouldn't have normally even considered applying. One of the first groups that we got connected with, well, DevOps was the first, but then the second group was the Women Who Code. And I'm very proud of the fact we have 23% of our staff is women.
That's awesome.
I had to approach things differently for them. A lot of them wouldn't even apply because, well, it's really hard, and I don't know if I can make it. And so I had to do a lot of convincing just to get them to take the HackerRank exercise. And in some cases, I couldn't even do that, so I had to get them in to actually write code on a whiteboard because they didn't. They were really scared of it, but super successful with it. And that has enabled me to build a great brand in Belfast, well-respected, at least that's what I hear. And now it's, we actually had a young lady, a developer who got the in-person interview with us and quit her job the same day that we told her she had an in-person interview. She hadn't even interviewed with us yet, but she was that good, that confident, and that wanted to work with us that much that she chose to do that. So
that's excellent. I mean, we need a lot more of those, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. That's great. When you and I talked, and you've mentioned this before, which was very profound, because we at HackerRank, and it starts from Vivek, has a very similar, we have the same philosophy, but you said candidates are not resources, right? And this is something that we all have sort of, starting with Vivek, and he instilled this, is people are not resources. And in the context that you talked about it was candidates are not resources, and it's really important that the candidate and the company sort of, the alignment and that relationship is really important, and so candidate experience has always been top of mind for you.
Yes.
Tell us more about that philosophy and how that's worked, and what are the things that you've done as you scaled up this team around the candidate experience?
Belfast had to adapt some, and we've had to adapt some. So if you go to Austin, the typical software engineer interview starts around 9 and finishes around 4. So it's a solid work day. I think there's 7 interviews in that. And in Belfast, the typical interview is a lunch hour interview spread out. You'll do one today, and then maybe one in 2 weeks, and then another one a couple weeks after that. So it'll take a month or so, or even 2 months before you finally get to a point where, okay, we're ready to make an offer. Well, that's too slow from my perspective. I had questions initially with the first group of folks we hired, like, hey, can you change that? And I'm like, no, we're going to do the same thing because we need to see, you're in a SaaS, when things get broke, you got to fix them, and it doesn't matter what time of day or night or whatever. So we've got to be able to assess someone under pressure. And we made those kind of shifts, and we went from 7 hours to 4 hours. But by using HackerRank, that 4 hours, it's still technical focus, but we also need to focus on culture. There was a comment, I remember, who said, skill's the most important thing. I don't agree with that. It is very important, but if they don't fit, it doesn't matter how good the skills are from a culture perspective. So we've had to adjust some little things like that because Austin is a very close-knit technical community. It was very similar in Belfast, very close-knit technical community. So taking the similar approach of understanding that if we do something wrong, take the wrong approach to diversity or culture or treating people like things instead of people, it will spread and we will fail. And that recognizing that they're in control in reality.
For sure.
They can go get a job, if they're good, they can get a job anywhere. And they're in control. I've got to realize I'm giving up control here. All I'm trying to do is, are they a fit with us? Are we a fit with them? And then come to an agreement on how much to pay them.
Yeah, I struggle with that one. Even in the Valley, trying to, customer success, hiring for customer success, I'm not in control. They've got plenty of options to go to. And that's tough, right? Giving up control.
Yeah.
Hung asked, Lindsay and Bradley 2 questions, and I'm going to want your perspective from the other side. The first one being, and for both of you, being the tech, your tech brand, right? And both of them shared a lot of insight on developing the tech brand, how important it is, and what approaches that they're taking. Would love to get your perspective, Sarah, on at Lloyd's. It's a massive shift, and what's working, what's not working, and then Paul share with us on Bazaar Voice.
Okay, so yeah, it's kind of challenging for us to develop a tech brand, but I think first and foremost we have to remain authentic. So we've got to be authentic to what we are. We can't pretend to be, Netflix or Amazon. We are a bank, but we are doing some exciting stuff in technology. So I think we've got to be authentic and think about the things that we can differentiate us. So for example, for us, it's about attracting technologists who want to do something at scale. So, we've got 30 million customers. A third of the UK's economy passes through the bank every day. So if you want to work at scale, we can dial that up as part of our tech brand. We let the technology kind of try and talk for itself. So we've really embraced the whole meetup scene across the country and have speakers and sponsor events for the things that we want to be associated with. So that helps us get our message out there without being kind of too pushy recruiting, which I'm kind of with you, Paul, on the, I forget sometimes we're recruiting because we let the technology talk for itself. So that's very much part of the brand. And then the third piece for us would be, again, very tied into what Paul said. It's about the culture. So it's what we offer in terms of the values and behaviors that are intrinsic to working at Lloyds Banking Group, and what comes with an organization as large as we are in the UK, in terms of how we rate as a sort of family-friendly employer, the flexibility we can offer, our aspirations to have like 8,000 apprentices by 2020, those sort of things that are all part of our sort of Help Britain Prosper mission that resonate as well. So the tech talent, the tech brand, is a sort of continuation and development of the brand of Lloyds, but then dialing up some of the technology and scale angles.
Oh, that's great. 8,000 interns. That's
apprentices. Yeah, so apprentices kind of a
apprentice,
UK
right.
concept, but we've already got 6,000.
Wow.
But that's about the pipeline. If we can't go out and get the ready-made article, we have to think about that pipeline, and it's really intrinsic to the UK and the economy as well. And our existing colleagues really engage with that as well, because they've all got either kids or nephews or friends, and they're looking for jobs in the UK. So it's a powerful thing.
That's scale right there, right? Paul?
So I'm going to start slightly different, just finish where she start where she finished it. So around the pipeline, and what one of the things I learned in Belfast is it's never too early, and it struck me as odd in that there's a lot of focus on elementary school, I don't know, primary school. And getting involved, PwC has a program there that kind of Dragon's Den approach, where you get the kids pitching technology projects and things like that. And it struck me in there, my daughter is what is that, Gen Z or whatever?
Yeah.
And she just finished her master's degree, but it struck me that I remember when she was 12, and she was interested in what I was doing and what I did and the company I worked for and things like that. And it's like, okay, it isn't too early at 12 years old to get them interested in technology and get involved as a company, representing the company in events like this with the kids. Because in 5 years, they're 17 and they're either looking to go to university, or they're looking for an apprenticeship, or they've already been coding for 5 years, right? And they're probably ready to go in terms of they could come in and start making an impact at the job. In terms of developing the brand, so from scratch, it was getting out there talking about, it's basically everything you said, getting out there talking about the technology and the challenges. The one thing is, a lot of folks don't know who Bazaar Voice is, what we do. We are the largest provider of ratings and reviews in the world. No one's close. I mean, we've got over 1 billion reviews in our system, right? 1 billion, so big B. I think it's like 1.1 billion right now. We see over 1 billion users' devices on a monthly basis. That gives me goosebumps, but it also gives the developers goosebumps
Absolutely.
when I talk about that to them.
Right.
And that's all I have to do to sell it, is just talk about the technical challenges, the scale that we have to work with, the fact that no one knows us, and it's like, well, that's kind of cool that no one really knows us, because you're operating at scale like Google and Amazon and Netflix, and having the same problems and challenges.
Right.
And when faced with that, it's like, I really want to work on that.
Yeah.
So being flexible has really been important, especially with moms. I have had 2 candidates, one man and one woman, who applied because we put part-time positions out there. But when we talked to them, it's like the gentleman wanted to work on an open source project 1 day a week. I'm like, okay, you don't need to work part-time for that. Take your day and go work on your open source project. And the lady had 2 kids that needed to pick up her kids twice a week and leave the office at 2:30. Her previous company, you have to be part-time to do that. Why?
Yeah, wow.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
So they're both full-time employees, and that reputation spreads, and that part-time listing just spread widely within the Women in Code community, and we got applicants because of that. So
It's fascinating hearing from both of you, and then from Lindsay and Brad as well, is that the brand, there's so many elements to your tech brand, right? It's not just what languages, what problems you're solving, but this is a multifaceted thing that we need to approach. Let's move to the last question, and I want to give some time to everyone in the audience to ask you questions, as well as folks in the live stream. So it's the same question that was addressed by Lindsay and Brad, so it'll be interesting to see how you're addressing it. That recruiting and engineering, while we're partners, there's also, we think differently. How do you work together, right? And it's like, do you have a C-level executive who's driving this top down versus it's grassroots efforts? From your perspective, when you're on that table with your recruiting team, what are you seeing alignment, or are you seeing dissonance, and then how are you handling that? And what's your advice to everyone in the room is, how should they be approaching you?
So my philosophy on software engineering is quality first. I think it's like in the long term, that's the least expensive way of approaching it. So my philosophy in recruiting is quality first. I don't care about the volume, I care about the end result and having the best quality software engineers. So I would say my recruiter and I are almost always on the same page with that. It's actually us arguing with hey, you're not going fast enough, you're not hiring enough. I think my target was 55 engineers by the end of our fiscal year, which was May. And I had, including the placement students, which are absolutely outstanding, I had 49. It's like success to me.
Right.
But from the C-level, it's like, well, we need to look at another location because you're not hiring fast enough. Like, okay, I mean, what are we talking hiring fast enough? 100 a month, 5 a month,
Right.
10 a month? So, but when it comes to quality, I mean, let's say by far they're the best engineering team I've ever worked with, and I don't like fight battles for them. My product team does, because these are the best engineers I've ever worked with. They're the most collaborative engineering team I've ever worked with. Like, okay, I don't have to say anything.
Right.
Yeah, it's so. Long-winded way of saying we're on the same page. The way we did it is like when a recruiter joined, we just sat down every single day, went through recs, went through candidates, went through job descriptions. She was learning about the company, she was learning about the technology and how to recruit the talent for Bazaar Voice. And now I don't do much with her because she handles it all, not all of it, but works closely with the different hiring managers to handle the hiring. I think they've got a great working relationship, and it's been because she's been on the same page with us from early on.
That's awesome to hear. Sarah?
So, obviously you've got a Belfast base. We've kind of across our sort of 5 major hubs in the UK. So I think we've got central sponsorship to be really clear about the principles around our sort of recruiting mission. So that we get the hirers on board kind of centrally, but then we kind of make it local. So we have an engineering lead taking the lead in Edinburgh, Manchester, West Yorkshire, Bristol, and London, so that you then kind of get into the detail locally, because the local angle can be quite a differentiator. If we sat in an ivory tower in London trying to tell them how to recruit in Edinburgh, we would probably not be successful. So an example of that would be When we recruit locally in Edinburgh, then we tend to use our Scottish Widows and Bank of Scotland brand there. The Lloyds brand doesn't speak to the local population. So you've kind of got to be aware of those local nuances. So we have a sort of central set of principles and a devolved model, and then we let kind of local activity between sort of local teams work with their own networks, with the data locally, and with the population that they are most familiar with to kind of get on the same page. And they may use a different hiring partner in one part of the country to another, because that's just what works for them. So it's kind of the things that we're quite firm on, and then the things we're a lot more flexible on. That's how we get the balance to get ourselves on the same page.
So like a lot more autonomy.
Yeah, just to kind of get that local buy-in. Because if you're going to work in the mortgage value stream in Halifax, there's kind of no point us dictating that from London. I'm not based in London. I'm based in Yorkshire, and I know what kind of works in my region. I wouldn't come down here and necessarily sort of preach to a different audience. So we do it like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we have a standard bar that we use regardless of location. So, I mean, it's like you're defined as, we call them P4, P5, P6, P7, and so forth. So it's the same bar no matter what the location is.
Right.
And none of that includes, like, you got to know Java or anything like that, right?
Right.
It's about, this is what you have to be able to do in a language. So, but that is how we've maintained consistency in terms of making sure we're hiring at the same quality level, no matter what the location.
That's great.
And the thing is, we have a kind of patchwork quilt of different technologies because of our heritage and our history. That actually, in some parts of the country, we might be looking for Java, but in others, we might be looking for .NET. So it's different. So we kind of got a whole myriad of different influences.
For sure. One of everything, right?
Yeah.
So definitely. That's great. I want to make sure that we have enough time, questions from the audience and then folks on the live stream. So please, I'm sure you want to know a lot more about, from the engineering side of the house or your business partners, what would you like to hear more from them? Do you guys agree, disagree? Are recruiters and engineers or hiring managers aligned, not
We're all
aligned?
introverts, so
Yeah.
we don't like
Yeah.
to ask questions and talk. So.
Well, you don't have to have a question. You can actually make an observation.
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah,
that's
absolutely, please.
Just wondering about asking someone to do a 1-hour test before you've really got strong engagement. That was what we saw in the. Sorry, like Gareth David Talis.
No, it's not good.
Hi, Gareth Dave from Talis. Hi. Just wondering about asking someone to do a 1-hour test prior to a sort of a strong application engagement in the process. How's the feedback been on that?
So we have three views on candidates. So we have applicants, sourced, and referrals. We never on sourced and referrals give them a test first. It's always engagement with at least a recruiter or a hiring manager first. And then as part of that, we describe, whoever was describing talking about telling them what the process was, we tell them, here's the process that we go through, which includes this technical screen using HackerRank. With sourced candidates, it does depend on, or not sourced, with applicants, it depends on how many. So like our placement applications, those tend to be in the 100 or so range. So we don't talk to them first. We basically send them the mass email with the HackerRank exercise, and those that complete it look at the results, and those that don't, then we give them, I think, 14 days or something like that, or one renewal of the link, and then we send them we don't even send them a note in that case. They basically disengage. So we looked at it as the different types, so we don't just automatically give them the exercise first.
No, we don't either, because kind of start with that really informal, just come in for a coffee and meet some folks and see whether you like the look of the place before we would launch into, the more sort of technical interview. So, because I think otherwise, it's down to expectations and kind of scaring the horses a little bit earlier.
Yeah, we find that a lot with our customers when it's volume or someone's applying. Even having that as sort of a apply here and there's a go take the test. And even in the instructions for the test, give them more visibility on once you take the test, what can you expect the next step to be, like how quickly before you respond to them, and they will take it, right? So especially when you're applying on your careers page, is just have like a apply here button and take the test, and you will see a higher sort of acceptance rate for wanting to spend the hour. The other piece that's really important is based on the role that you're hiring for, is the content or the questions that you're asking, are they relevant and are they contextually relevant? So someone that's a little bit more senior, 5+ years of work experience, or even 2 to 5 years of work experience, if we design assessments which are more, textbook, straight out of college, I have to go remember, this is what I did, this algorithm that I don't remember anymore, I don't use it every day, I have to go crack open a book, then there's a sort of do I need to go put in the effort to do this? Versus, let me give you something that's more real world. And so one of the examples that Oded was showing is, bring something from your own code base. It's an opportunity to sell to the candidates as well, even if they're just applying or they're getting sourced and saying, here's the type of problem you're going to be solving, go solve this and experience it. And then that, we will see a much higher acceptance rates from them. So there's lots of different approaches and techniques, and depending on the source, how they're coming to you, the experience level, there's sort of different workflows that work really well.
We tend to try to pick questions that are related problems that we've solved versus creating our own problems.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like, we have this problem, let's find something that's similar to it.
For sure.
So,
yeah, there's a big library for you to start from.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Paul, really. I was quite interested, you were mentioning about the mum returners. Hello. You were mentioning about the mum returners and how you almost had to persuade them to take tests and kind of engage in the process. Just curious as to how you started those conversations with them in the first place, where you were finding them, and how you kind of worked on that diversity and inclusion piece.
So wasn't just moms, it was just basically women, regardless. Okay. And there were almost always referrals. I can't think of any that were, the one that quit her job first, then did the interview, she was a referral, but she obviously was very outgoing in terms of taking chances and taking risks in that. The other ones, we did a, very early on, July 13th of 2017, we did a Women in Tech, or Women Who Code talk on Kanban and culture and that. And out of that, we got one person that was interested, and then when we hired her, then she kept connecting us through that community. And so that's, that basically has created this series of referrals. I think there's only one. I think only one of the women was not a referral. I think all the other ones were referral of some sort.
Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering if you kind of did any personalized outreach. I didn't know if you help your recruiter with kind of
basically getting involved in everything women in tech community, whether it's Lean In, women in tech, women in who code, women tech maker. I sponsor them. Because I do have a lot of folks that already participate there, they ask me, they give me a heads up when events are coming up, and I just sponsor, and it doesn't cost a lot of money, right? I meet up maybe 250 pounds or something like that for like pizza and drinks and things like that. So, and the main thing I really push for, and this is women in Tech Maker. They wanted us to be the platinum sponsors. Like, I'll be the platinum sponsor as long as I get a keynote. Because getting somebody up there talking about our tech and our culture and that is like the key to expanding the brand. And if I can at least get them one-on-one or 2-on-1 where I can get them talking about their experience, I can maybe get them over the hurdle of taking that technical exercise. At least one of them was so nervous that I basically did a whiteboard with her and was like, I think you should just interview with us. And she did, and we made her an offer, and she joined us a few months later. So
that's awesome. Sarah and Paul, I could keep you here on these uncomfortable chairs with that light flashing in your eye the entire afternoon, but we're all around. I want to make sure that everyone is aware. We're all going to be here. Join us after. Vivek's going to come up and with his closing remarks. We can ask as many questions as you want, one-on-one, 2-on-1. But thank you so much for your time and your insight. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Wait, do we want to move this? I have the clicker. All right, how's everyone doing? Good? This is like one of the quieter crowds. I hope you're all intensely listening and not in your emails. No, super exciting chat. I hope you had like takeaways. One of my key takeaways after listening to a lot of these, a lot of the people discuss is how you should actually talk about your challenges and the problems that you solve. When you talk to candidates, I gave an example of Goldman Sachs. I think Paul talked about the Bazaar Voice example. I didn't actually know that stats pretty impressive in terms of the scale that we operate. So in terms of like the closing remark, one of the theses that that we are working towards as a company, we talked about skill being the core element of the future and how resumes are probably not going to be worth much if you think about like a 5 or a 10-year time horizon. But I also think one of the things that is actually going to change a lot is the way that you actually build teams. We think about the teams right now. Everybody started building the team in a very centralized way, which is all of your engineers, all of your teams are just in one location. And now you're starting to see actually more and more distributed teams coming up. In fact, there are a lot of companies that are actually starting off at the core being distributed. One of my friends runs this company called GitLab. They're about 400 people growing up to 1,000, and they're completely distributed. They don't have an office. So it's going to be 1,000 people by the end of the year, and they don't have an office. So this guy actually works out of his apartment, and there's a cat that just like goes around it. I mean, that's all the office is. So it's amazing to see how people are transforming, and which makes sense. Like talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. The other trend, thinking about like 10, 15 years from now, is I think a lot of the ways the teams are going to be built is what I call as elastic, which is if you were to be able to spin up, if you had like a great idea of a project and you want to spin up a team right now, which is like 7 developers, it's going to take you you have to start sourcing, you have to identify skills, you have to do assessing. It's going to take you like 6 months for you to even build a team, and another 6 months for you to ship a simple proof of concept. Now, I think in the future, you would be able to ship proofs of concepts or things faster by actually being able to spin up a team. For example, if you think about HackerRank, we have so many developers who have like so many different skills that in theory, you could actually spin up a team with people across the globe who can start to work on your project tomorrow. So not only is there going to be a shift in the way that people do recruiting, there's also going to be a huge shift in the way that people are going to build engineering teams in the future. And so that's a thesis that we work on, and the underlying building blocks still being the skill of a developer. So that's all I had. I know I'm the guy between this and lunch and networking. But before I wrap up, I do want to do like a small experiment on this crowd. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask anybody to get up and dance or sing. Can everyone close your eyes? I'm allowed to keep my eyes open so I can actually see if you're not closing, so please do close. All right, can all of you raise your right hand? Okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how likely are you to attend the next main event? Just making sure the 5 means you're highly likely. I just want to make sure the scale is right. All right, so that's our NPS. Lunch is downstairs. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're all going to be here. Thank you, everyone.